Hello everybody, welcome to part 3. This is the final preach that Dan did in praying the Psalms, Wells in the Wilderness. And this one was called...
Praying Our Trust.
Praying Our Trust, which is a good one. So would you just give us a brief synopsis of this sermon?
Psalm 16, which has been one that has been quite close to my heart over the last few months, that I've spent some time camping in and praying. There's just so much in here about the different areas that David brought to the Lord and praying his trust in the Lord. And this idea was really interesting to me about how trust is hard to measure, and it's hard to always know what we actually are trusting in. It's one thing to say we should trust in the Lord and to know that the Lord is trustworthy, but how do I feel when money is coming to an end, or I'm in a situation where it looks like there's a dead end in my life, or there's pressure and there's weight on me, and I'm thinking about it constantly, those anxieties and those fears. Those things can rob us of our trust, and we can feel like we're in a place where we actually are not trusting the Lord. And trying to understand that gap between what we believe we trust, we believe and we sing about God's trustworthiness, and how we sometimes unconsciously or sometimes even consciously really feel. And how we move towards closing that gap. How we, in our prayer life, try to tune our hearts towards closing that gap. So David talks through different areas that he's laying before the Lord, and he's choosing to trust in him.
I like kind of the analogy that you gave of the guitar
You've never played with an out-of-tune guitar, hey?
Too many times. Too many times.
Broken a string
too many times, having the capo, being in the wrong key. There's so many things. But I think it was such, I guess for musicians, if you play guitar, it makes sense. But it's like the potential for that guitar to make beautiful music, and for it to do what it's supposed to do is there, but you can kind of miss the mark. So the intention and the potential is there, like you're saying. Like we can sing, we trust God. We can sing and we can say and we can profess and we can read the word. We trust you. We trust you. But then there's that moment when you're in those seasons or in that moment where it's completely different. You're saying, your mind can say it, but your body's like, something doesn't sound right. Something doesn't, And so it's a great analogy to go to see the potential, and we can fill ourselves with the God, the word, with God's faithfulness. What we can hear the stories, we can hear the testimonies, we can read His word, we can see He was faithful then, He'll be faithful now. We can see all those things. Until it's your turn, until it's your season, until it's your anxiety and your pressure and your inability to see maybe that he's close, or his faithfulness, or and now all of a sudden, can you really trust him, kind of thing. And I think it's so important for us to really allow that to go from head knowledge to it being our very existence, that like in our actions, in our living, in our everything that we do, our outward expressions actually match with the word and what we've heard and all of those kinds of things. So I think it was a good analogy to kind of put the two together. Like the potential to trust is there. He's always trustworthy. He is faithful. He is those things. But do we really believe it, and do we live that out? Do we
Even the best guitar goes out of tune.
Yeah.
If you play for an hour on a guitar,
Yeah.
it starts to go out of tune.
Yeah.
And then if you throw into that the fact that the guitar got dropped or
Yeah.
got bumped,
Yeah.
or you had a toddler smacking it,
And the neck snaps off.
the neck snaps off. Cheapers, you got stories.
Yeah.
But those are things that obviously can completely wreck our being in tune.
Yeah.
And I think as humans, none of us have the perfect story. None of us have perfect parents or perfect situation where we never got hurt,
Yeah.
or we never got let down, or there was
Yeah.
never a thing that we trusted God for that
Yeah,
didn't come
yeah.
to pass. Like, those are all things that can affect how we see God and how we trust in Him.
Yeah.
And it's, once again, it's this idea of not just white knuckling and saying, I do trust God, I do trust God. It's how do I close that gap between what I choose to say and what I choose to believe, and what I'm actually feeling in my heart. And that can take time, and it can be a process, and we can wrestle with God, and we can talk to Him about our doubts, and we can say, God, this is not how I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Help me.
But I think closing that gap, and you kind of spoke into it and kind of alluded to it, like, in the moment of, the tuning process is a relational process. That tuning process is an intentionality of really working to closing that gap. And so, I think it's understanding that, we need to be in His presence. We need to be with Him. We need to have enough relational equity with God to see Him actually working in our lives, because it's like, it's one thing to hear that you trusted God and that He came through for you, and that's your trust and your experience. It can influence me, it can impact me, but if I'm not spending enough time with God and spending time with Him and allowing Him to kind of, like, those small things. It reminds me of, it seems silly, but you remember, what's his name, man? He puts the carcass out, and then, like, it's Gideon.
Oh yeah.
It's like you can kind of go for these you can have these little moments, and you can kind of miss it. But it's so beautiful to see at the end where he hears God's voice, and now he defeats an army with only 300 men. Yet you go early on the story, and there's this process of him trusting God. Okay, God, if you're really going to come through for me, make the dew fall on the side and keep the fleece, dry. And then next day he's like, well, do the opposite. And but it's that wrestling, I think, of like allowing that growth. And I think it's a strengthening of that trust muscle of like, I don't think for God it's like this thing of like we don't trust that He's faithful, but I think it's just that reminder for us that sometimes we need to be in those experiential moments with Him to see Him come through in the small things. Are you trusting Him in the small things? Because it is like, I think we can hear the stories and the testimonies and think, oh, I'm going to trust Him for the big thing. It's not saying don't trust Him for the big thing, but have you walked the journey and trusting Him with the small things, so that when you do get to that thing, you've closed that gap. Because I think it's often like we can, have those religious things where it is, we can think, okay, because we're quoting the Bible verse and all of these things, and we're repeating the songs, and that the gap is closing. But in fact, the gap isn't closing, because that isn't really it's not becoming real to ourselves. And so like that wrestling with God, I think, is so important. Building those testimonies in our lives.
And recognizing when actually is a God thing.
Yeah.
That this came together.
Yeah.
Small things.
Some
people are so great at that.
Yeah.
I'm not always one of them.
Yeah.
Some people will be like, point to something like really like small, and I'm just like, yeah, I suppose, like, yeah, that's cool. But they thanking God for that.
Yeah.
They're like, God, you do care about the details.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that, definitely.
Yeah. I think the joy or the aim is to really be able to notice that in real time. hindsight is 2020. We so often it's like weeks later, days later, months later, years later, you're like, that was a God moment. But in the moment, I think maybe we were so far that we couldn't recognize it. And I think the goal is to recognize and work on that trust with Him, which is so important. And I think we get the opportunities to do it with people, but so often we do allow, like you mentioned, I think we do allow the things that go on in our lives to distort our relationship with God. And so we start to distrust God, and we start to keep Him at a distance. And even though He is always faithful, we know we can He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. But we allow our experiences to kind of almost create the gap.
That thing of the attachment styles was super interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's quite deep. It's not always easy to even be aware whether I've got some attachment patterns that are insecure, as they would call it, where in that meeting of relationship, in that vulnerability and that sort of connection, there are things going on inside of me that I'm not even conscious of, and there's these different recognized attachment styles that we can be avoidant and distant and keep people naturally at an arm's length. And there's the one where you need connection, but you also, that connection is a dangerous thing for you. That signals danger.
Yeah.
So you both you're in a catch-22.
Yeah.
Like you desire that connection, but it's scary to you.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work. You can't stay. You're in and out, and you do things that are disorganized around it.
Yes.
And then there's the anxious one where we throw ourselves into connection, but then we always are concerned about rejection.
Yeah.
And we're looking out for rejection all the time, that we almost like self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
And like when you think about that, there, each of us have taken knocks in life. And I just think it's an amazing exercise to try and be aware of some of the things. If you look at some of your close relationships, look at sort of the circle of relationships, maybe just outside of that, to try and gain some awareness, or which relationships have broken down, which might have been, because there's always two to tango, right?
Yeah.
They've got some attachment issues. I've got some attachment issues.
Yeah.
It's just very interesting to try and think and understand, why are we missing each other in trust?
Yeah.
And how much of that do I actually put onto God as well?
Yeah.
Deep stuff.
It's some deep stuff. No, that's
maybe
good.
maybe to speak about with your therapist.
Yeah. That's true. But yeah, if there's again just one takeaway in this topic, and then maybe we can also do a takeaway with all three, kind of like with all three in context, praying our perspective, praying our satisfaction, and this one, praying our trust. What would that takeaway be for this one, praying our trust? And then again, what would that one takeaway with the context of all three, and working on all those things in our lives, those different areas and elements, what would that takeaway be for the series?
Yeah, I think the praying our trust again is that process and that practice of coming into tune, which is something that is going to happen over and over again in our lives. And what are those things that pull me back into a place of trust with the Lord? When I'm distant, or when I've had a knock, where do I go to when I need to come back into a place of connection and trust, and knowing that He's good, and knowing that he can take care of me and I can trust him with my future and my. So I think that would be the big picture there. And then I think across the series, there's all these overlaps.
Yeah.
Really. And we talked about wells in the wilderness, and it's also, that greater practice in our lives of deepening our prayer lives. And where do we go to when we want to pray? Sometimes we don't have the words. And especially when we feel like we're in a wilderness season and we're dry and there's just nothing bubbling from our hearts and nothing speaking to us.
Yeah.
And where do we start? And the Psalms are just such a beautiful place for us to start kickstarting words towards God in prayer. And, most of these Psalms, all of the Psalms actually point to Jesus as well, and point to him and how he's, the fulfillment of our satisfaction. He's the fulfillment of our trust at the end of the day, and putting our trust in his victory. And he's the fulfillment even in Psalm 90, and praying our perspective, and praying the brevity of our days. He's the one that makes our frailness and our finiteness, he's the one who bridges that gap to us. And so there's these beautiful themes that run through the Psalms that were written, some of them 1,000 years before Jesus was born.
Yeah.
And yet the fulfillment of our relationship in Jesus is there, baked into these ancient Psalms. So I really trust, and my hope is that we would be enticed into practicing and trying and experimenting and finding the Psalm that you feel like speaks to you in this season that you're in, and allowing the Lord just to slowly and gently speak to you through that.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's so good. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, it's been a good series. And I want to encourage you, if you haven't watched them or you want to go watch them again, you can always head over to the YouTube channel. Always look for the Wells in the Wilderness series, and it's there. But trusting that we can start that process or start engaging in our prayer life. I think the thing that jumps out for me is so often we can see prayer on almost these two juxtaposed kind of positions, like poles, almost like there's the emergency prayers. You're only really praying when there's absolute chaos and it's like you've hit rock bottom, there's nowhere to go. But then there's the other side where I think this falls into maybe those that are Christian and have the daily and the weekly routines of church and being in the environment, is that it's another tick box. It's just another thing that we do, and it's finding that life of we can call on God, we can trust Him, we can He is our Savior, but also He's that person who wants to be in and involved in our everyday life. He cares about the detail, and we're going on this journey with Him and alongside Him. And so making prayer less of this emergency and less of this religious tick box, but actually as much as our natural breathing in and out is, so is our prayer life. And there's depth to it, not just this surface level, but there's actually depth, and I like that, all three of these series just had so many different practical elements, like, part one, just having a clear and like real understanding of who God is in our situation. Because if we have a warped perception of who God is, we're coming in at the wrong, we're coming in at the wrong space. And so our prayers are just going to be directed, or our motives are just wrong, and so, and then understanding that, we need to be satisfied by Him. And so, as much as we're speaking of the wilderness season, but it's about being satisfied in all of life, and, God cares for the desires, and He cares for the things, and He wants to be close. And then, really, I think the big one is the trust, is like when we come into those seasons where we really do need to trust that God, has our back, that he says, who he is. Do we truly believe it? And I like that none of these Psalms really speak about God failing, but it really speaks about us taking those steps of really like opening ourselves to who he really is, kind of thing. And so I think, it draws us closer, and there's so much more intimacy with God and who he is, irrespective of the season, whether it's a wilderness or a season of flourish. But thank you, Dan, for taking the time to preach these 3 sermons. And again, I hope that you guys are encouraged by them. You can always go and watch them again, and that we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks
Keep
for
well.
the conversation.
Cheers.